One of the first ones I'll start with is the idea of an ocean of peace, which Prime Minister Ramboka had proposed earlier this year, and something that the government's working to. But on a more personal level and level that we can all relate to is something Reverend Wanga had said today when he was talking about how we all come from different backgrounds, different cultural perspectives, and to me that is what the ocean of peace is. And I'm sure though the Prime Minister speaks at that level, that's what he's alluding to, that the Pacific can teach the rest of the world so much about peace. We, for the way that we have lived as a region and in our own cultures, and coming down to the when you go back to your roots, to the way things were and how we came to the region, there's a lot to reflect on how peaceful things were and the roles that each individual played, that the community depended on each other but also respected each other. And that idea of a culture of peace, I'll just speak to some one of the quotes that I came across when I was reading this was open quote, "Our forebears populated islands scattered over the world's greatest stretch of water, covering a fifth of the planet's surface. It was one of the most amazing migrations in history, a triumphant testimony to human achievement, endurance, and fortitude." Close quote. And that speaks of how our forefathers first came to the Pacific and populated the islands, not just Fijians, but looking at all the Pacific islands. And they did that as one people migrating on boats, stretching across water, and all those that came after you had Abel Tasman, Captain Cook that came after, they weren't able to successfully come into the region without depending on the Pacific Islanders that already lived there. So, and because of the way they came about things, it's thinking of the many rather than the few.
Yes.
Thinking of the collective, and because of that idea of an ocean of peace or a cultural attitude, it's why we have been successful when we go back to our roots, something that Rosa spoke to, something that Manasa, you've also spoken to. The other that I wanted to speak to was the setup of the Pacific Islands Forum, the regional setup. I know a lot of us don't agree with the forum as it is, and that sometimes it's a bit disconnected from what's happening at national level or at grassroots level. But the idea of the forum, when it started with our forefathers in the 1970s, we had, and that was a regional push. There was Grand Chief Samari, there was Father Walter Linney, Sir Albert Henry, Honorable Chief Mataafa Yosefo, Prince Tupelakia, His Excellency Sir Hamad Iril, and Irima Tabeito. That was there were 7 Pacific Island countries that initiated that, and in Rotsa Kamsa Samara. When they pushed for the idea of a regional body that was governed by our region, for our region, it was the idea of that we as Pacific Islanders knew what was best for our people, but we would also include everyone. We had a holistic approach. You didn't leave people out because you saw the value and the role that each person played to what the survival of the community was, what the survival of the nation was. So reflecting on these things, it's something that I feel like each of us in the room, we work, it comes in our work, it comes in our personal lives culturally. And the idea of it, of the Pacific Islands Forum, when they strove to achieve that, and also the idea of the Pacific Way and an ocean of peace, was in sovereignty of the Pacific, a pride of indigenous tradition and culture, and a region of people of different races, opinions, and cultures that can live and work together for the good of all. It can differ without rancor, govern without malice, and accept responsibility as reasonable people intent on serving the interests of everyone. So I feel if we as leaders in our own ways can influence the leaders that we have to be able to go back to these roots, back to these ideas, we could actually achieve more than we have achieved in the last few years. And to that point, with the idea of non-violence, violence happens to everyone, regardless of your gender, your race, your age. But more recently, we have seen violence happen to women and children. And that has increased over the years. But that idea of going back to culture and respecting each person for the role they play, the role they play in your life, this could contribute to many of the social impacts that we're facing. Giving people an identity, a cultural identity, understanding that you are one person in a bigger group, that you have a place and that you should respect the other's place that are around you. So that is something I wanted to reflect on today, and to the idea of the Ocean of Peace and International Peace Day, and what we as Pacific Islanders, what we can contribute, what our cultures contribute to the idea of peace and the idea of not just the absence of violence, but being able to work together for the benefit of everyone around us. The last thing I'd like to, end on, and it was funny because I'm also a graduate of the Oceania Peace Building Institute, and I started the same year as Wilfred. This is in 2022, and we had a symposium in the middle of the 2 weeks, and Dr. Babu Aindo had spoken then. Amazing speaker, amazing facilitator, and very fortunate to have learned from him. But one of the things he had taught us during the week came from Psalms 85:10, and that is, mercy and truth are met together, justice and peace have kissed. And I'm reminded of this because Rossi, you said, no, there is no peace without justice, but it's looking at the four married together. And I think a reflection, and especially those in the room, something that's just happened, we were talking a bit to it this morning, was with the release of George Speight and Shane Stevens and a few others. And there's, on social media, you'll see that people are like, oh, it's not right, it was treason, he should have been in there for life. And then there's others speaking to, he's served 24 years, what more can you ask? And was everyone who was involved at the time, have they all been brought to justice? So the idea of Psalms 85:10, mercy and truth are met together, justice and peace have kissed. If you reflect on that situation, mercy for the two that were released and the others, because they have served the time. If you look at it from a legal point of view, justice has been served. 24 years is a very long time. They've lost so much. We've advanced so much. Yes. The iPhone came out. We've moved into a social media era. The TVs have changed. They would come out to a completely different world. Mercy and justice. But when you look at truth and peace, have they been met? And how can we contribute to that?
Yes.
And is the idea of punishing everyone the best way to meet that? And one thing that I would reflect on last and leave us with is, in this room, it's like a Talanoa we're having today, and we're achieving a lot, learning a lot from each other. And maybe that's something as a nation that could be utilized to be able to meet peace, to be able to meet truth, to be able to meet mercy and justice where it's needed the most. So, Vinakavaklivu for the opportunity today. Those are some thoughts I'd like to leave us on.
Nakavalehu.